think that we need to make progress on fentanyl so that we don't end up seeing the 25% tariffs come back. And we need to make progress on the things that are irritating to the Americans, the digital media tax, the banking industry, telecom, supply management. Those keep coming up, but those can only be resolved in the context of a broader renegotiation. We need an election. We can't have one prime minister start those discussions, a second prime minister carry it a few yards, and then a final prime minister negotiate it.
Now, for today's top stories, we got the Danielle Smith going toe-to-toe with Vassy Kapelos. We also have Vassy and a panel discussing the position that the federal government has left us in and if Parliament should be recalled. And we also have two bombshell announcements from the U.S. As Donald Trump late last night said that they are looking at potentially owning the Gaza Strip in the Middle East, rebuilding it, and displacing all those people there, as well as the president from El Salvador saying that they will take any of the U.S.'s illegal criminals for a fee. Now, I want to start off with the announcement coming from Trump late last night around 10 p.m. As the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was visiting. They both decided to do some press, and during that press conference, Trump dropped this bomb for all the media to hear.
As far as Gaza is concerned, we'll do what is necessary. If it's necessary, we'll do that. We're going to take over that piece, we're going to develop it, create thousands and thousands of jobs, and it'll be something that the entire Middle East can be very proud of. But everybody feels that continuing the same process that's gone on forever, over and over again, and then it starts, and then the killing starts, and all of the other problems start, and you end up in the same place, and we don't want to see that happen. So by the United States, with its stability and strength, owning it, especially the strength that we're developing and developed over the last fairly short period of time, I would say really since the election, I think we'll be a great keeper of something that is very, very strong, very powerful, and very, very good for the area, not just for Israel, for the entire Middle East, very important. And we'll again, have thousands of jobs, and there'll be jobs for everyone, not for a specific group of people, but for everybody.
You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there, redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that.
Now, I personally am not sure what Trump was trying to accomplish with this announcement, to be honest, because even after Benjamin Netanyahu leaves, these protests, I don't think are going to stop. They might actually ramp up with this announcement. So if Trump is ready for that, then kudos to him. But now as we pivot back to Canada, as I mentioned at the top of the video, Danielle Smith and Vassy Kapelos go toe-to-toe. And Vassy just kept beating a dead horse, in my opinion. She would not relent on the idea of fentanyl not being a big issue. And she kept questioning basically Danielle Smith's loyalty to Canadians outside of Alberta and what she is planning to do for the country, even though she's reiterated many times that what she is doing is for the country, not just for Alberta. Take a look.
So it's up to each premier to make those arguments. But I think the fact that we had a breakthrough on energy resources writ large, I think that shows that there is a pathway for us to demonstrate the supportive value that Canada has and why this relationship is so unique and so strong and should stay that way.
Is it your intention, though, over the next month to advocate for all those other areas that you talked about? Because I think Canadians have an impression that, some premiers are advocating for something, others are advocating for other things. There's somewhat of a federal voice unifying everything, but not really at all the time. Could you be blunt with Canadians? Is it your plan over the next 30 days to advocate for a pause writ large, or will you continue to focus solely on energy?
I've never been focused solely on energy. I've always focused on this special trading relationship we have as a reason for Canada as a whole, every province, all products, to be able to go across the border tariff-free. I think our strongest argument is around our energy resources. As you've seen, we've had a breakthrough, and now we just have to work on making sure the Americans understand that entire picture across all tariffs. But I don't want to get distracted on the economic arguments without understanding that we have to address the issue of fentanyl deaths. When I talk to members of the administration, they're very aware that 75,000 Americans a year die of fentanyl. We have a fentanyl overdose problem in Alberta that we've been tackling for 6 years. So let's work together to try to stamp that out for good. And then we can get on to talking about the economic arguments later.
But the issue of fentanyl is not one that happened overnight. And I think we've talked before about not to take away anything from obviously the poisonous supply and the impact it's had on both Canadians and Americans' lives. But the data from border authorities in the US clearly shows that our border, when it comes to fentanyl, it's a fraction of the seizures that are happening overall at both borders. Were you making those points when you were talking about the border? Because the way that you've communicated around it seems to accept the characterization of the US, which is not based in fact.
Well, it's not helpful to tell the Americans, well, we've only provided you a supply that would kill 9.5 million Americans. That's not a persuasive argument, and I think we should stop using it. I think we need to understand Canada's problem is different. Canada had a big problem with TD Bank acting as a money launderer. They got a $3 billion fine. We've had our casinos in British Columbia act as money laundering. We have the issue of not actually examining containers when they come in on our ports. We don't examine every car that comes across the border. We have cars being stolen and stuffed with drugs and sent outside of Montreal ports. We've got packages coming across the border through Amazon that go unchecked. So just because we haven't found it, maybe it's because we don't have the processes in place to be able to find it. Maybe that's what the Americans are raising. And now we have an opportunity to address that because our people are dying too. And we shouldn't be complacent about that. We should want to work with them in our own interest to be able to stamp out the cartels as well.
Now, I don't disagree with anything that Danielle Smith said there, but you are about to witness now Vassy just kind of spiral on the whole fentanyl situation and the legitimacy of that claim. Now, as Danielle Smith pointed out, and I mentioned it a few videos ago, that so-called only 43 pounds equals about 20 kilos. And at that rate, that's about 9 to 10 million lives that could be lost if they get a lethal dosage. So breaking it up and saying, well, it's only 43 pounds doesn't do us any good. But as Vassy continues to push on the legitimacy of the fentanyl claim, I think Danielle Smith handles it quite well. Take a look.
Yeah, and I certainly don't think anyone's advocating for complacency. And I think even in, for the benefit of Canadians, which I think something you and other premiers have said, like there's nothing wrong with addressing the fentanyl issue. But and I take your point about not saying, well, only X amount of people are dying, but that takes away completely from the factual basis. Like, he wants to punish us in the same way he's punishing Mexico, predicated on some sort of pretext around the border when it doesn't exist in the same way. Why don't you want to make that argument at all?
He wants us to recognize that Canada enjoys a very special relationship with the US that no other country in the world enjoys, and just show the respect of taking seriously the fact that they've got people dying and they want it to stop. That's it. We should stop making excuses, stop saying, yeah, but we're not as bad as the other guys. We should just say, yes, we agree. And we're going to take care of our part of the issue so you don't have to worry about us anymore. So that's all I would say, is that what he's observing is that things are a lot worse than they were last time he was in, that things are going in the wrong direction. We've got to reverse that. So I would say no excuses. Let's just work on that And then hopefully 30 days from now, we'll have made enough progress that we can move on to some of the other issues.
Why are presenting facts, though, excuses? Like the way you're describing it is just accept the way President Trump characterizes things and kind of roll over. I'm not sure Canadians would be comfortable with that.
Well, I'm not comfortable with the fact that over 1,000 people per year die in my province from fentanyl. I'm not comfortable with the fact that cartels are operating in my province. I'm not comfortable with the fact that I'm having to shut down super labs and drug houses. I'm not comfortable with that either. And so I'm not going to downplay the serious tragedy and loss of life in my province because of the Mexican cartels and this poisonous drug that has caused the addiction. So I see it a bit differently, I think, from you, Vassy. I think it's just as serious an issue for me in my province as it is for the Americans in their country, and that we've got to crack down on it, and this is our opportunity.
So you don't see any value in, and I'm not saying dismissive, like I'm not saying be dismissive. I don't think Canadians want to be dismissive of the fentanyl crisis, which is a crisis on this side of the border as well. But the idea that President Trump is describing, what comes into the United States as responsible for the numbers that he's put out there, like, again, the facts don't bear that out. Why are you unwilling to concede that?
Well, because we haven't done the analysis yet. Let's examine every package. Let's examine everything, every container coming into our ports. Let's examine every truck coming and going in our country. And then we would be able to say, okay, we feel confident that it's not us. We can't say that right now because our people are dying too. And so the fentanyl's coming from somewhere. The precursor drugs are coming from somewhere. We had a major case that took place in Alberta this week where one of these guys who was busted in 2021 just got 16 years in prison. We've got a couple more cases like that coming. I'm not going to downplay that. That's serious business, and we're doing everything we can to do law enforcement as well as our recovery approach to getting people off drugs. And we've been talking about that as a government for 6 years. So I'm going to show how serious we are and do as much as we can to make sure that our own people are made safe.
Now, towards the end of what Danielle Smith was saying there, this is actually something that Pierre Poilievre has been reiterating as well. We need better security. We need better defenses. Even just the scanner situation at the ports, seeing what's coming in and out, increasing that availability. These are all things that Pierre has talked about. And so it's good to see that Danielle, him, kind of on the same level. But I just didn't get why Vassy kept pushing back. Because even if fentanyl wasn't the end-all, be-all, we still have a numerous amount of other issues, like Danielle pointed out. The cartels, the money laundering, the flow of guns between the U.S. and Canadian borders. A lot of people are saying, well, what is Trump doing to decrease the amount of guns coming through? Well, who cares? What are we doing to reduce the amount of guns coming through? You keep claiming that the guns is such a hot button topic for us and that so many are coming through the border and getting onto our streets, which are killing our people. So then wouldn't you want to increase our border security regardless then? How about we beef up our border and we can stop the guns coming in, as well as the drugs, as well as the illegals crossing over? Like, yes, obviously the U.S. can do more to stop that flow, but it's on us to also do that. But speaking of illegals, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the president of El Salvador has put out a statement saying that he is willing to help the U.S. in taking any criminal, regardless if they are El Salvadorian, Colombian, Venezuelan, even American criminals, and keeping them in his super prison that he's created for a fee. Take a look.
An unprecedented potential deal between El Salvador and the U.S. The country has offered to house violent criminals from America, including U.S. citizens, and receive deportees of any nationality. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio unveiled the offer after meeting with the country's president on Monday.
He has agreed to accept for deportation any illegal alien in the United States who is a criminal from any nationality, be they MS-13 or Tren de Aragua, and house them in his jails. And third, he has offered to house in his jails dangerous American criminals in custody in our country, including those of U.S. citizenship and legal residence. No country's ever made an offer of friendship such as this.
Well, El Salvador says it will take a fee to house convicted criminals in its mega prison. The country has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world.
Now, this seems highly unconstitutional, and even Marco Rubio said that there was legalities with this because of the Constitution. I'm not quite sure how you would be able to deport a person of origin from the U.S. to another country. That doesn't quite make any sense. But we have seen the country of El Salvador. They were one of the most crime-ridden countries in the world, and now I believe they are the safest, at least in Central America. So the guy can work wonders. His super prison is amazing. But yeah, I just don't know how they could be taking U.S. citizens and deporting them to another country instead of leaving them in their country of origin. That's a little bit confusing. But for the final story that I wanted to take a look at, it was Vassy in a panel talking about how the federal government, they're pretty much fed up, especially the conservative member. They are fed up with the semantics and the playing around that the federal government is doing right now. And they say, just call an election, help the Canadian people out. You're leaving us in essentially a limbo, and that's not beneficial whatsoever.
Lisa, I'll start with you. First, on the question of prorogation, what's your take on that?
We're prorogued for one reason only. It's so that the Liberals can find themselves a new leader. That's it. The only reason why. We're supposed to be sitting right now. We're not sitting right now. I'm not saying we. The Parliament should be sitting right now. The House should be sitting. Senate should be sitting. Work should be done. Committees should be meeting. People should be talking about this matter from across the country in the place that it makes sense for it to be talked about. I can't tell you how annoying it is for me that there's all kinds of Liberal candidates down on the airwaves in the United States talking about this, as opposed to people talking about this and the impacts of it here in Canada. And if I hear one more time that, well, it's unfair, if they try to take the government down while they're looking for their leader, I really don't care anymore, Vassy. I'm back to I don't care anymore. Quite frankly, we need to make sure that people are hearing what's going on from all 338 parts of the country that are represented in the House of Parliament, and they're not. They're getting it through a prism of people trying to be the next prime minister. That's wrong. That's not the message or the narrative we need to have right now. And quite frankly, they're all getting paid, and they should all get their butts back to Ottawa.
Benzie, it's not just the Conservatives saying that Parliament should come back. It's also the NDP who say, like, for example, if there needs to be some sort of stimulus or massive package for workers who are laid off, should these tariffs be applied, that Parliament should reconvene essentially to move that through as legislation. Lisa pointed out the Liberals are saying in some circles, having an election right away, since the opposition parties have promised at the earliest opportunity to topple the government, wouldn't be, the right, quote unquote, right thing to do at this moment. And the other argument they're putting forward is, and Minister LeBlanc said it here on Sunday, we don't need Parliament for anything that we need to do. We can increase liquidity, for example. We can put in supports through EI. We have the ability to do what we need to do without Parliament being in session. How does that all play out in your mind?
Well, I mean, the Conservatives were pointing out to me before I came on the air, Vassy, with you, that their own documents yesterday about this, this détente with President Trump make the point that they do need the Commons to be back in session so that they can pass some legislative changes to strengthen the border, as President Trump and Premier Smith really want. But I'm surprised at how we're kind of letting this vacuum. Canadians are letting this vacuum continue. March 4th, I think, is when Trump's latest reprieve ends. That's still 5 days before the new Liberal leader is chosen on March 9th, and then the House doesn't come back until March 24th, right? So 3 weeks after that. So that's a whole lot of limbo. And even someone like Mark Carney, who loves to dance around reporters' questions and Canadian journalists, that's a lot of dancing for him, presuming he wins, or Chrystia Freeland there on Morning Joe on MSNBC. And does leave your head. I do have to scratch my head, Vassy. I got to tell you, I don't know. It's like this is playing out in another world. It's just bizarre.
Now, I think actually many people would agree with him that we are living in a sort of bizarro world. We have this lame duck prime minister. We have the looming threats of tariffs constantly now. We don't have a government currently inactive, prorogated, as she mentioned. But it is now becoming more and more clear that Carney is the guy that will be the next prime minister. And I'm sure you guys have seen this already, but he put out a statement in regards to the tariffs. And throughout this whole statement, he was talking about, I'm in regular contact with Foreign Minister Melanie Joly, Dominic LeBlanc, Mark Miller, all of these ministers, cabinet ministers. He's not an elected official at all, but apparently he's getting this one-on-ones with these individuals. And Ruby Dahl, one of the other candidates for the leadership race, actually called him out on this, saying, in what official capacity is Mark Carney in contact with Canadian government ministers Melanie Joly, Dominic LeBlanc, Mark Miller, and David McGuinty, and what classified information is being shared with him? Does Carney have a cabinet position we do not know about? And not only that, a few hours ago, she actually tweeted saying, showing the phone call that Trump was having with Trudeau and having Carney also there with Trudeau. But not too long ago, she wrote, if you're happy with Trudeau, you will be happy with Carney. So she is just guns blazing. She is really targeting Carney, trying to smear him as much as she can. But with all that being said, I'd love to hear from you guys. So please let me know in the comment section below what you think about all this. If you can, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. That really helps out the channel. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.